So hi everyone. My name is Sinin and I'm the founder of Beirut by Dike, which is basically a page where I share comics and intersectional stories about what it's like to be queer in Beirut. And I'm super happy to be here today. And I was invited by Haven for Artists to basically take over the online platform for the past week, where I have been talking about this issue of residing in public and private spaces, because it's an issue that has been very important to me on a personal level, but also academic and visual levels. So when it comes to me, the reason why I started Beirut by Dike to talk about the experience of navigating the city was also a time where I had cut my hair and started presenting my own gender in a way that was more masculine. And I started realizing that the way in which people were reacting to me was very different. And it suddenly hit me that I was registering as queer now, and suddenly became much more conscious about how this affects my own interaction with people, but also my interactions with spaces and the spaces I inhabited. So that's exactly what we'll be talking about here today. And I would love to pick up the conversation because I think that as women and queer folks, I think we're all too familiar with all sorts of threats that we need to navigate in the city, especially after the Civil War. Um, because it also affects the way in which, again, we interact with spaces around us, be them private spaces or public spaces. Today, the COVID-19 pandemic only exacerbated an economic recession that was really a crisis in the making, in my opinion, which definitely makes things a bit more complicated. So now is a good time to be having this conversation around what is the relationship that we have with public spaces, how did it change, and also what does that mean when it comes to our ability to accept or even imagine alternative ways of inhabiting space and inhabiting spaces with others. Which is why I'm super, super, super happy that our speaker today, Dunya Saleme, accepted to join us. So for those of you who don't know her, she's just this brilliant, amazing, caring person that I met 5 to 6 years ago, incidentally, in an alternative space in Damme, the feminist cooperative. So Dunya is a feminist. She's an urban researcher. She's now working at the Beirut Urban Lab at the American University of Beirut. And her work basically revolves around gender and space, urban rights, and urban practices, everyday urban practices, but also housing rights. And she's a perfect person to be speaking to about this because Dunya also is a doula who accompanies folks throughout their reproductive health journeys. She basically supports them in navigating a patriarchal medical system that I also think we're a bit too familiar with, unfortunately. And she's really just been everywhere and doing all sorts of things. She's been involved in numerous initiatives and organizing around basically the right to the city and feminism. So, Dunya, since you're here, do you want to join the conversation? Hi, Dunya.
I have to turn the video,
Yeah, you have
right?
to turn it there.
Okay.
Yeah. Are you,
Hi, everyone.
are you using your front cam?
Yes, now yes.
Okay, great. It's good to have you, Dunya. Um, Sarah saying hi. It's really good to have you, and thanks so much for being here. I know you must be super busy under the circumstances. Um,
No.
so I want to jump right into it and ask you in general, Dunya, how do you think that urban spaces in Beirut are gendered, and do you think that the COVID-19 pandemic maybe exposed or shed light on some inequalities in the country, and what are they?
Thanks, Tinin, for having me. This is super exciting. I love talking about this, and I'm even more glad to be talking about this with you. Okay, so maybe you've heard me say this before, but the binary between private and public spaces is gender from the beginning. So this, I mean, it started as gendered spaces And it started to be defined more as such in the turn of like the industrialization and the growth of capitalism, or the capitalist system, where there is two types of labor that were divided or defined. The first one that is associated to women is the one around the house that we call care work or reproductive work, and it has been associated with the home, the private space, where we imagine the home to be a space of nurturing and care and all of these things associated to women and their work. And public space was created and conceptualized as the space where the productive part of work happens, if you want, the productive economy. So work, but also by extension, politics and all of these things are associated to this public life. And of course, this is the realm of men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this binary is gendered from the beginning. But of course, as queers, we know that as soon as we start poking a binary a little bit, it starts to be not so clear-cut.
Yeah.
And the feminists have been saying for a long time that, first of all, domestic work doesn't only happen in the house. So we have things like buying groceries to prepare food, taking the kids to school. All of these things happen outside the house in public spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, home is not always the safe space that it is drawn to be, or this place of nurturing and care, because actually the majority of sexual violence happens inside the home, but also domestic abuse, whether emotional or sexual, all kinds of violence can happen inside the home, with the target being women, but also children, non-conforming people, and all of that. So just to say as a start that the binary and how spaces are gendered is complicated, and has been complicated by feminists, because you said that you were interested in also the academic part of it. So feminists are really the ones who have brought all of these things to the table. Okay, warning, I don't know, I'm not gonna talk about the pandemic and COVID as so separate from the economic crisis. They're really, really linked.
Yep. Oh, it's cut again. Beirut internet. Okay. It starts? Yeah, exactly. The last thing we heard was that the pandemic and the economic crisis are linked, and then it cut.
Yes. First of all, they're super hard to separate here because they're happening really at the same time, and they're having very similar effects. We can say maybe the pandemic effect will stop in a year or so when this is all over, but the economic crisis will continue to have the same kind of effect with time. And both of them as crises have reinforced or exacerbated things that were already existing, inequalities that were already existing. And here, in relation to gender and space, or queers and space, I would say two main things, maybe 1/3. The first is harassment and catcalling in the street has definitely gotten worse. Also, I mean, this binary that the house is for women and the street is for men is definitely, although it's not so true, is definitely reinforced by men in the street who want to remind you that they can tell you if you feel comfortable here or not, and they have the power to make you feel uncomfortable in public spaces. So this was already existing. This was already a problem before. Now it has been so exacerbated. Among other things, you probably know there is no more electricity, so homes are functioning sometimes not on the private generators, which means that actually the streets are permanently dark. There's no more light in the street.
Right.
And I was thinking today of a group, a neighborhood group that we formed here I live in Jaitewe in Beirut. We formed a neighborhood group, and one of the initiatives that we wanted to do was to map the lamps that are burnt or dysfunctional and see at night where do we feel unsafe, and then present this to the municipality and ask them to repair them. Now this is a joke. I mean, we don't even have the start of grounds to ask for this. There's just no electricity.
Mm-hmm.
And you go out at I walk my dog at 8-9 p.m. There is no one in the streets, and later than that there's also no one. If I didn't have a dog, I would not feel comfortable walking in the street.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of this, so a crumbling infrastructure, there is the fact that things are so much in chaos that people are starting to feel more and more entitled and feel like nothing can touch them, and they will not be held accountable whatever they do. So the stories every day of women getting followed in the street, of people getting harassed and catcalled has multiplied. And of course, I mean, women are particularly targeted by catcalling, but also anyone who is not conforming, anyone who doesn't look like. So a man wearing lipstick, a visibly trans person, a woman who's masculine or not feminine enough, all of these people will just will be the targets of more harassment. The second thing within homes and what's happening, I mean, you can imagine from what I said, the home is not a haven for everyone. It's not a place of care, of nurturing for people who are going through interpersonal violence or interpersonal relationship, partner violence. I'm thinking of all the young queers who are stuck in homes with homophobic parents, who cannot express their gender comfortably inside the home because they are stuck 24/7 with these people who are abusive or homophobic, even if the abuse is more mild with
verbal or psychological. Okay, this cut again. I'm not sure if it's cutting for everyone or just with Dunya, but let's just wait. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'm on 3G. There is this is the best I can do.
No, that's okay. It cuts right when you were saying that even if the abuse is more mild.
Yes, like remarks about how you look like and how you're dressed and how you style yourself and all of these things. This is a 24/7 kind of thing you're living, because you do not have the spaces that you used to be able to breathe in, going to university, to school, or even using university or school as an excuse to go out of the house and see your friend, your lover, who you cannot invite to your parents. So being stuck inside the home is definitely a crisis for a lot of people during the pandemic and the lockdown. But also it is a problem on the long term, because Beirut has no affordable housing, and the prices of housing and renting in Beirut are astronomical. They are many times the minimum wage, knowing that anyways, who cares about minimum wage if you don't even have a job? people are losing their jobs, so this is also another problem in accessing. But even if you do, you cannot afford housing in Beirut. And I always think I want to tell my feminist comrades why they should care about urban planning. And
Yes.
this is why, because we think urban planning is something that doesn't really affect us, but in
Sorry. Yeah, I'd start again. So you were saying, that you need to remind your feminist friends how important urban planning is
because access to housing is a very main is something that affects our personal lives very, very closely. For the reasons I said, we need to be able to find homes for ourselves that are safe, and we have so many reasons to be unsafe inside of our homes.
Yeah.
I was going to say that my colleagues at the Beirut Urban Lab, where I work in AUB, have been doing a lot of work on housing and have shown how actually these are intentional policies. Making housing expensive is the result of years of central bank policies and governmental policies aiming to do out of a house a commodity.
Yep.
So houses in Beirut are actually for the person who has $1 million and wondering, what do I do with them? I put them in the bank, or I invest them in an apartment, and then I will get I don't know what return on investment after a few years. Instead of recognizing the social value of these spaces, which is that people need them to be able to live safely in order to sleep and eat and cook and love safely inside of these spaces. So affordable housing is definitely something that is missing here, and that people will start feeling more and more strongly with time. I'm going on a rant. I just want to add something. I want to add that in what I'm talking about, class and nationality or race play also a very big role in that. So when you have a car, you definitely can avoid this kind of harassment that can happen in the street, or simply walking and feeling scared because it's super dark. So when you have resources, you can take a taxi, you can drive your own car, you can afford a house inside Beirut. And so obviously class plays a big role. I'm thinking also of, for example, trans women who have particular difficulty finding jobs because they're discriminated against. And then when they find a job, it's badly paid. And even if they have the means, they will face discrimination when the landlord sees them and doesn't want to rent to them because of a lot of prejudice. Similarly, someone who is a refugee or who is Syrian, Palestinian, Ethiopian will also be facing the same kind of hurdles trying to find a home, on top of not being able to afford it. Do I continue? Okay.
Yeah, no, I think what you're mentioning is very important, right? The intersection of gender and class with these issues. So how the home can turn into this hostile environment under the lockdown. I'm wondering, you mentioned this initiative that was done in Jaitewe, and I know you were quick to say that it was very chaotic and it's kind of impossible to move it forward. But I am wondering, not to be optimistic, because I don't think we could even think positively. But I do wonder, do you think that we could somehow use this as an opportunity, this economic crisis, to start perhaps changing people's attitudes around alternative housing or cohabitation? What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think that times of of severe economic crisis are the perfect opportunity for people to start organizing and find the alternatives that they need, because in times of prosperity, if you want, it's much harder to mobilize people. Now people actually are listening more when we say that housing has been commodified, or we need the right to housing is a real right. The right to affordable housing is something that you are entitled to. People who are in danger of being evicted or looking for homes are become more radical, actually. It's just simply that. In crisis, people become more radical.
Exactly. Everyone's suddenly a socialist after the COVID-19.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, can we continue this discourse? Yeah.
Exactly. So I hope that there will be more initiatives for cooperatives. I've been an advocate for cooperatives, housing cooperatives, for a long time. I always say this is the best solution, and it's a bit difficult to start formally. So to register a co-op formally, to buy a whole building, demands a lot of money to start.
Yeah.
But now I have a lot of hope for squatting. The study I mentioned that we're doing at AUB showed that at least a quarter of or 20% of apartments in Beirut are empty. And as I said, these are spaces that are needed.
Yeah.
And on top of this, we know that a lot of them are owned by banks. So I don't feel bad occupying a house that is owned by a bank. They don't need it. It's not a space for them to sleep in.
And it's not being used.
And it's not being used, definitely. So I'm hoping that there will be more interest for that at some point people were organized in that way to be able to provide housing for themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to public spaces, after the uprisings, there was this gorgeous symbolic reclamation of space. The Human Rights Watch produced this gorgeous article that was very also optimistic about this change between queer folks and their relationship with space. It used to be anxiety-provoking, and now it's not. I was also wondering what you thought about this. Was it experientially, was it actually empowering, or did the recent militarization through the lockdown change things? So what do you think about this, your relationship with those public spaces, even outside the bind?
I think definitely being in the street and creating together pockets of safe spaces in the street where you can be 200 people chanting لوتي مش مسبة and كسي مش مسبة was amazing. And I'm sure it changed a lot of people's not only relationship to public spaces, but also feeling of belonging or feeling of community, feeling that actually even if you feel alone, you have someone, you have people backing you, even if you don't know them. You feel that you're not really alone in the country. Now I don't know, I feel a tension. I'm not sure what the answer is, because on one side, knowing that everything was closed during the lockdown, now everything has reopened and it's not sure if the second wave, what will happen. But when everything was still closed, because everything was closed, the only space where you could go out and see your friends was just the street.
Okay.
So it had a feeling of actually this could be my space. We sit on the sidewalk and talk. This is something that doesn't happen often in Beirut, and I've seen lots of group of young people. I always during the lockdown thought of not only queer teenagers, but just teenagers in general who are not standing their parents and stuck with them and just say, please let me go to the street to hang out. This was cool to see, and I think that a lot of people started feeling that they can reclaim these spaces. But as I said, now it's starting to feel more and more unsafe. Harassment is starting to, maybe the harassers were inside their own homes when the lockdown was reinforced, and now they're back in the streets. Yeah, so there is a tension. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I wanted to add something. I mean, on top of the things that already existed, or the inequalities that already existed that now were exacerbated, there is another issue on the longer term with the pockets of safe spaces that existed, like Haven for Artists, like Damme, like Space 27, all of these spaces that are rented actually. I would say I would be worried for their future and for their economic sustainability and for their ability to continue providing these spaces where people can meet and they feel safe. I hope also that there is going to be some mobilization, especially from outside Lebanon, in supporting them and allowing them to continue existing through the crisis, or that they join the movement to squat empty apartments and let them just have no rent expenses if they can.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you mentioned this. I mean, sustainability is one of the challenges that we're always facing when it comes to thinking about new alternative models of organizing. So one of the way maybe in which they could do that as you mentioned, is through mobilization, joining the the effort to squat, which I would absolutely support. I'm wondering, like, are there any other measures of support that are now available, or that you think should be available when it comes to supporting queer folks who need housing?
Yeah. I mean, there are pre-existing networks of of housing each other. So there are people who put rooms in their apartments available for people who need urgent housing. These are pre-existing to the crisis, so I imagine now the need is even heightened. We're seeing more and more actually initiatives that are more intersectional, so not specifically towards queer people, but more generally. There's a coalition to the right to housing that is being created right now. I know that they are working closely with the anti-racism movement, for example, where also, I mean, migrants and migrant workers are absolutely also in bad situations right now. I'm pretty sure that that it would be easy for a queer movement to integrate this kind of. I mean, what is also nice in times of crisis is for how people start to realize how much fights are, I don't know if you say fights are intersectional, but fights are related, and our fights are, I mean, if we're in it together, whether migrants, queers, women, I don't know. So I hope that these links will start actually being reinforced. Usually the state and power in general tries to put us against each other and to let us fight for resources when there is a lack of resources. So I hope there will be clear active publicity to being in solidarity with each other and working together for these things. It's not just the right to housing, it's the right to safe public spaces, but also the right to food security and, I mean, all of these things that are now in crisis.
Yes, I absolutely agree. I want to give yes, 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 yes. So, I mean, one of the ways in which we could fight the state on this is discursively, right? So, you know, insisting on this discourse that no, our struggles are not to use intersection, but whatever, dependent, they're linked.
Yes.
What other lessons that we've learned from the past do you think that we need to really not forget today or mobilize when it comes to maybe, I don't know, resisting the state, when it comes to, you know, the fear of the discourse of fear that they use or what have you. So what are things that you think that we've learned that we definitely need to use now when it comes to organizing around queer issues?
I mean, I don't know if we have learned this or if there are different movements within or different currents within the movement to say that our rights, I mean, you know, the purpose is not to, I don't know. I'm trying to say it without being super mean. I mean, there is no movement that will exclude anybody. This is not the Lebanese queer movement. Yeah. No, this is the movement of queer people in Lebanon, whatever the nationality of people here or their race. This is also not the movement of middle class queer people in Lebanon. We really need each other, and we will not win without each other. And also, the wins that we get are gonna be beichin. Yeah. If it's not a win for everybody, it's not gonna be real wins. That's for me the lesson. I don't know if it's a lesson really, but I think in times of crisis this becomes even more heightened. No?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing also about the uprisings, that one of the things that was good about it is that it united all these people. On the other hand, there's this rise in national identity, you know, that could reinforce racism. So
yes, definitely. Yeah, so, yeah.
I think it is important. It is an important lesson.
Yes,
I think so. Okay, does anyone have questions for Dunya so far? There were some comments. Do you have any questions? A lot of people saying, yes, thank you, intersectional queer rights. I think someone said, I think the collapse of the country is making it easier for criminals and harassers to get away with anything. Right.
Yes, so exactly.
It was, I mean, it was already chaotic. I can only imagine how it is now.
Yeah, there is a feeling of like being untouchable. There is this kind of attitude.
Who invested in real estate lost what they want to. Okay. Are there any questions that someone wants to ask? Okay. Someone is saying that migrant workers are leaving.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't see it, but yes, definitely a lot of migrant workers are leaving, and they will be leaving in big numbers in starting the time where all the airports reopen. That's definitely, and that is another, I mean, and I don't know how related to space it is, but that is a huge problem because the embassies are asking for dollars in order to process the files of people when
I did not know that.
and they are supposed to be the ones defending the rights of their
Yeah.
citizen.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And this is definitely not the case. So this is one of the most unjust things happening right now in the country, on top of the kafala system that is
Mhm.
an absolute injustice. Now people are facing this when trying to leave.
Yeah, unfortunately. Okay, so someone is saying, okay, so we have several questions. One, what steps would need to be taken for a model of social housing that is in the Netherlands to be implemented in Lebanon? I don't know if you know how to answer this, Dunya. Because I
I'm
have
not
not
sure I
been
know
deep in
what.
the private sphere anyway. So I can't tell you about models in the Netherlands. I cannot. Um,
I don't know what the model of
yeah.
social housing is in the Netherlands, but usually social housing needs a lot of investment from the state. And right now, not only the state doesn't have money, but the state also is not interested at all in investing
Mm-hmm.
this kind. If you're talking about co-ops, which I think are quite popular in the Netherlands and in the whole northern region of Europe, that's what I was talking about. This is very, very possible because it's led by people. It will not be easy to implement in Beirut because Beirut is so expensive and you need to
Mm-hmm.
have actually a building or at least a land on which to build something. But it is a possibility, especially if we seize a building that is owned by a bank. In Barcelona, they have been doing a lot of policies
Yeah.
forcing banks actually to either so the state takes back the apartment that is left empty or makes the banks pay lots of taxes. So we could imagine, for example, lots of these buildings, these apartments in several buildings that are managed by the people. So
Mm-hmm.
managed by a body formed by the inhabitants. So it really resembles a co-op,
Yeah.
except it's owned by a public entity because they were seized from the banks. I don't know if that answers the
Okay.
question.
No, I think it very much does. And speaking of squatting, someone was asking also. I think I heard that, yeah, okay. They were asking, were you encouraging squatting? Yes, we were. If so, would that be less dangerous than staying in the abusive homes of people they are living with? What would you say to that?
I mean, squatting needs to be supported by a movement. So usually when you decide to squat someplace, you absolutely have to have, at least for the start of the squat, a big number of people who are supporting you and protecting the space. I was suggesting starting with property that is owned by the state or property that is owned by the banks, because then you are not infringing on private property of an individual. You are more reclaiming something that is supposed to be for the public. So in terms of this course, I think it will work better to encourage that kind of thing or to create a movement for that kind of thing rather than just
Yeah.
yeah.
I think what people usually have in mind when they're thinking about squatting is what about state violence and how do you counter that? I think this is usually what. Yeah, I don't know if we want to talk about that, but I mean, it's definitely, I think usually people have this concern. Um,
Yeah, this is definitely a concern, and I'm not encouraging in that sense. Like, go squat something, it will be easy. I'm
yeah,
saying, I'm
the
saying this
community
is
effort.
one of the options right now, and there is a chance to have the kind of movement that is needed for squatting. There is also I'm sure soon there will be more and more people who are being evicted from their own homes
Yeah.
by the banks because they're not paying the monthly payment of the loan. Here too, there is a chance to have a movement with people actually, like it happened in Spain, camping in front of the door and not letting the police get there. I mean, none of this is is really pretty or
Yeah,
easy.
yeah,
These are really not easy times we're living in. Things are gloomy.
yeah.
So we really only have each other and our solidarity.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so someone is asking, are there any Lebanon-based queer ORGs, that organizations that you can recommend for those of us living abroad to follow or support?
I don't know if Haven for Artists consider themselves a queer organization. Damme Cooperative is a feminist, but also very, very supportive of sexual rights. You can buy Damme's calendar for 2020. I know it's July already, but you could support them in that way. I don't know, Sinin, help me, because I think if I forget,
I mean,
organizations, it's going to be political.
Yes, exactly, right. It's dangerous. I mean, I know that there's a kind of a coalition that's happening between Mosaic and Helm and Haven, who are basically, who have organized and are still organizing a fundraiser campaign. So you can actually check out the link on this page on Haven for Artists. Because they have actually been helping off the record or not publicly, they have been helping queer folks who are in need of housing, support. So that's one way.
Thanks, I didn't know. This is super. Yeah. This is really good to know.
Yeah. So the link for donations is at the top of the profile page. So there's that. So someone's asking, what does sustainability look like for the organizations you mentioned, like Space 27, etc.? I think you've already covered this, right? We've talked about this. Okay, do you want to add something to that, maybe?
No, I mean, it's finding cheap rent or even a donation. I mean, you don't have to squat to live to be somewhere for free. Someone who has an empty apartment and who wants to donate this for the group or the organization could do that. And solidarity networks. I think also with time, people will develop more and more bartering practices. So offering something in exchange of something else, and that also, these organizations could also enter these kinds of deals with someone who needs the space. In exchange, they will, I don't know, provide some food or things like this. I don't know. I'm not gonna mention grants and these things. Yeah. I'm sure there are some money that is going to come through that kind of things. But I'm hoping to think of even more sustainable than this, because grants, we know, can stop at any moment.
Yeah. Okay.
Why are Arabs considered foreigners? But I also struggled for being Arab. I'm so sorry. This sucks. Yeah. Because Lebanon is a racist place. I'm really, that's it. Lebanese people are racist. That's all I
have to, yeah. There's nothing to say about that. It's messed up.
Yeah.
Okay. So Sarah's asking, how do you see ways of reclaiming public space from queer intersectional point of view? I also think that you've covered that. Is there something you want to add about that?
No, what did I say to cover that? I don't know. No, I don't have anything to add. I don't know. We have to think of this together as a movement. I mean, it doesn't necessarily look like walking with a flag or this kind of very visible things, but it can be just simply doing a picnic while being visibly queer and non-conforming in a park, or these things, accepting and accepting that we look different and that it's okay. People are gonna look a little bit like this, but I always think of the little girls and the teenagers who can have this little light in their heart that says, "Oh, okay, I can look like this
Yeah, yeah,
actually," because
exactly.
the femininity is like a way of looking feminine for women here is super hegemonic. It's very rare to see women looking differently. I know I don't remove my leg hair, and I mean, the looks I get are permanent, but I love to see a teenager looking, and I hope that even if it's 1% think, okay, I can
This
be
is a
queer.
possibility. Yeah, exactly. It's just a
Yeah,
possibility made, made accessible.
yeah, yeah. And queer in the original sense of it, of being weird. I
Yeah,
can be different. I don't have to look like this model that I am forced to consume.
yeah, yeah. Everyday practices are so important. You're absolutely right. Um, okay, do you want to add anything, Dunya, to everything we've been talking about today?
No, but I want to add that Patabiza, which I know who that is, has shared a map where you can see which properties are owned by the banks.
Amazing, perfect. We're so making
So,
this public. Yes.
so you can be inspired.
Visa. That's amazing. You're brilliant as usual. Yeah.
Yes, we love you.
Absolutely. Okay. Um, so before Instagram cuts us off, Dunya, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your ideas. And for everyone here, if you've enjoyed this, please do check out Dunya's research. I know she's published on refugees as city makers, on gender-based violence. So do check that out. And if you are interested in taking part of similar discussions, I'm going to be having a series of talks. So please do follow Beirut by Dark as a page. And before we leave, I also want to say thank you for Haven for Artists for making this possible and for all the work that you do. And
Yes.
would absolutely support squatting initiatives also, if that's something you want to consider. So thank you everyone for being here, and apologies for the hiccup in the beginning of the talk.
Yes. Thank you. That was so fun. That was super interesting discussion for me. And thank you everyone for the questions. It was super
Thank
interesting.
you. Okay, yalla. See you soon, hopefully, okay?
Bye. Yes. Thank you.
Bye.